For those of you who don't know me, I'm Assistant Pastor Elizabeth Cichocki, and I'll be giving the sermon today. So I want to talk about spiritualism as a science. The National Spiritualist Association of Churches, known as NSAC, defines spiritualism as a science because it investigates, analyzes, and classifies facts and manifestations demonstrated from the spirit side of life. That's a mouthful, right? Some people think science concerns itself with nature and religion with the supernatural. Both science and religion place an emphasis on a way to know or understand the world, even though these ways are different. As you may remember, spiritualism started in 1848 when the Fox sisters started communicating with a spirit in their home. A mere 13 years later, in 1861, the U.S. Civil War started. The U.S. Civil War was the deadliest war in American history. Over 600,000 Americans died in that conflict, more than in World War I and World War II combined. With this much grief in one young country came parents and loved ones longing to hear from their fathers, brothers, and sons who died. Spiritualism grew from all this grief by giving comforting messages to the living from their deceased family. Another new process started in 1822 called photography. About 40 years later, getting a photograph was actually a big deal. People would pay $10 for one portrait photo, and that was a lot of money back then. It's like $375 today. So you have photography and spiritualism starting around the same time. And what do you get? A new phenomenon called spirit photography. William Mumler, M-U-M-L-E-R, is credited as the first spirit photographer. Mumler was able to use photographic plates to capture images of spiritual beings when taking a picture of a living person. He produced these amazing photographs of real people with wispy figures behind them. People swore they recognized these figures as their lost loved ones. Mumler took the famous picture of Mary Todd Lincoln sitting in a chair with the ghostly figure of the deceased President Lincoln standing behind her. During this time, spiritualism had a newspaper called Banner of Light. The Banner of Light reported that another photographer could imitate Mumler's ghosts only through the use of two negatives and by printing one image on top of another. Mumler only used one negative, and this photographer could not understand how Mumler could have accomplished the spirit images with only one negative. I'd like you to ponder these questions. I ask you all, do you believe Mumler actually took pictures of spirits? Or do you think that his pictures would be labeled as fakes with all the science we know today? Let me tell you another story that took place in the 20th century. John Russell, a psychic medium, became a photographer early in his life and then experimented with spirit photography. John had a film camera, Remember those? Some of us do. Where you had to load the film, thread it through, and turn the spool. John had taken a professional photography course and decided to attempt spirit photography during a seance at his home. During the seance, the gathering picked up a female spirit present. She gave various messages to the people at the seance. So John decides to get his camera and take a picture of this female spirit. Everyone attending the seance said, "John, she does not want her picture taken." John said laughingly, "Oh, come on, what's the harm? What's the spirit gonna do? Let me take her picture." The gathering repeated, "John, she does not want her picture taken." John ignored them. John takes his film camera and snaps the shutter in the direction of the female spirit. Then he advanced the film with the lever, which is what you needed to do with that type of camera. Everything seemed to be working inside the camera. The film seemed to advance. The spool that winds the film seemed to be moving. And in the little window that shows the film counter, the numbers advanced to the next frame on the film. But John could feel the film in the camera was not moving, because you could do that with those cameras. And he took a couple more pictures. And he could feel the film still not moving. And the camera was operating like the film was moving, which is physically impossible. He knew something was not as it should be. So he went into a dark room in his house, opened the back of the camera, and even though all the levers had worked, all the numbers showed that he had taken pictures, the film had not moved from its initial position. He thought, this is physically impossible. This cannot happen. So he shut the camera, went back to the others, and told them what he had observed. You know what they said? "We told you she did not want her picture taken." He finally gave in and apologized to the spirit. After the spirit left the seance, the others told John to try to take a picture, and the camera would work this time. He took a picture, and he could feel the film advance, and it was working. John kept using the camera until the end of the roll. He noticed some interesting issues with the camera when he put a new roll of film. Those photographs would come out with these strange streaks. Some would be washed out, some would be totally black, and some would be double exposed, even when he did not do a double exposure. After a while, the camera just stopped working. It would not advance, would not take pictures. The shutter release button stopped working. And strangely, the camera began to leak oil. This bizarre manifestation of oil kept happening for months while the camera was not being used. When that oil stopped leaking, the camera totally and completely shut down. John concluded that the female spirit who did not want her picture taken was able to do this to his camera. He said he learned his lesson. Just as you would ask a living person if they want their picture taken, you need to ask spirit before you take their picture. So again, I ask you all, do you think the female spirit was able to manipulate John's camera? Or do you think the film camera had a defect and it was just a coincidence that it broke down during a seance? Even if hard science may indicate that spirit phenomena is impossible, we know as spiritualists that these types of spirit experiences are real and do take place. Think of the times you have had a spiritual experience. Could those experiences be proven by science? Do you even need them to be? I would like to end my sermon with a quote from Albert Einstein. You may have heard this one before. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Amen.